So, today we're primarily going to talk about the different food pyramids that are out there and the current science behind them and which ones may be helpful to you. Are you confused about the current dietary guidelines? We would be very surprised if you weren't. There's a lot of conflicting information out there. And so, hopefully, we're going to provide a little bit of clarity today and a little bit more insight into which food pyramids may be right for your particular situation. So, some things we're really going to touch on today. We want to help you identify some of the most common food pyramids and food dietary guidelines that are out there. We want you to understand some of the differences between generic guidelines that are meant sort of for a whole population and some more well researched alternatives that might be applicable in your particular situation. I want to help you identify some commonalities amongst the guidelines and some common themes that are just sort of helpful for general good wellness and good nutritional health, and that are probably good for most people to follow. And then lastly, we want to talk a little bit about how to integrate and apply these guidelines to optimize your own personal health. So, a lot of us were raised with the food pyramid that we thought was gospel, right? The food pyramid that came out in the 80s and the 90s, the one you see up here with the grains at the bottom and then fruits and veggies, and it leads up to the top with the fats. We all grew up with that, learned it in school, and have seen it throughout the decades. And the reality is that this food pyramid was never all that well researched. It came from a conglomeration of small studies and not a whole lot of great data. And, as a general guide, not the absolute worst thing, but the emphasis on the bottom portion with very heavy use of carbohydrates and no distinction between processed and unprocessed foods has led to a lot of confusion and frankly has contributed to a lot of the diabetes issues and the obesity problems that we're seeing in our current environment, which is why the government has tried to reframe some of this over the years. They've come out with the MyPlate or the MyPyramid, which are attempts to restructure this a little bit and provide some more nuance, although I think they still don't quite hit the mark. So, the problem with a lot of the food pyramids that come out, and especially the ones that come out from big public agencies, there's a lot of politics involved. There's lobbying, and they're meant to be sort of one size fits all approaches for large swaths of the population. And often that's just not very helpful for you as an individual when you're trying to figure out what to feed yourself and feed your family. So, the bottom line though, if we take a step back in general, if you follow any of the food pyramids, any of the food guidelines that are out, almost all of these recommendations, even the classical food pyramid, is better than eating what we like to call the SAD diet or the standard American diet, which is really high in carbohydrates, particularly very processed carbohydrates. Think like French fries from fast food restaurants, things like that, processed sugars, saturated fats, sodiums, right? Any of those things, and that's what most of us eat all the time, any of those things are really major contributors to heart disease, to diabetes, to insulin resistance, and to cancers. And so getting away from that stuff in general is always going to result in better health. So regardless of which of these pyramids you decide to follow, they're always going to be better than following that SAD approach, that standard American diet approach. And I think it's important for us to realize too that even though many of us think we're eating a little healthier than that, we often are not because we're kidding ourselves. A coffee from Starbucks or a similar place might be just a coffee, or it might be a salted caramel mocha with 570 calories in it and a ton of sugar. So I think we all just need to take a little bit of an honest look about what we are actually eating and then compare that to some of these guidelines that are out there and see where we might be able to make some changes to improve our own health. And that's really what this is about. It's just starting to stop and think and make some plans and be intentional about what we're eating and about what we're putting in our bodies because it's going to have a long-term impact on our health and our family as well. We want to become health conscious consumers. And our goal in this is not just to not be sick, right? We want to thrive. We want to feel well. We want to be able to perform our best as we age into our 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. And so we're going to start somewhere and then start making progress toward lifestyle and health optimization. There are a lot of options out there for healthy eating. Let's talk through some of them now. So, again, getting back to the food pyramid, and this is another slight variation on the classical food pyramid where they've put, exercise and weight control underneath the bottom and then tried to shift some things around and reduce the carb intake a little bit. And this is not a bad version from the Harvard School of Public Health. But again, you have to think of it, this is a general recommendation. So an ideal pyramid is going to be personalized for you and personalized for you in a way that takes not only into account your own preferences in terms of what you want to eat and what you like to eat, but also whatever health issues you are currently dealing with. Some food pyramids are better for reversing particular types of problems than others. So, as a general rule, this food pyramid is not a bad one for a lot of people. If you're already very healthy, this is a very reasonable approach to take. Focus on exercising every day, monitor your weight, have some whole grains, some healthy fats, some fruits and veggies, and then meats and other products, right? It's a good, well rounded approach. Nothing wrong with that. But again, it's for people who are already, in general, quite healthy. A similar option, the healthy eating plate, again from the Harvard School of Public Health, not a bad option. There's a little bit more nice nuance here, and there's specific recommendations about drinking water and limiting milk because there's a lot of sugar in milk, which I think, a lot of people don't appreciate that very frequently. And it does talk about this concept of healthy fats, which I like. Not all fats are bad for you, right? Not even all saturated fats are bad for you. And it specifically says to avoid trans fats, which I think is extremely important. And two things that I think the My Healthy Eating Plate or the eating plate here gets right are a focus on healthy proteins and vegetables, and then a little bit lesser extent to whole grains and fruits. And I think these are excellent priorities to take. Again, this is probably doing a good job for people who are in general fairly healthy to start with, don't have a lot of weight to lose, don't have a metabolic syndrome, diabetes, something along those lines that needs to be reversed or managed in an aggressive way. Good general guideline for most people. I also like that in the vegetable section, there's a focus on, greener things, non-starchy things. I think that's great. So again, a good pyramid for people who are otherwise generally healthy. Another one to talk about is the paleo pyramid or the ancestral model. There's a lot of good, compelling data about this in terms of its benefits for things like metabolic syndrome, for inflammatory diseases, autoimmune illnesses, things of that nature. Again, the focus here is good. Vegetables at the bottom with a focus on nice green things, right? The non-starchy vegetables. And then if you move up, a focus on proteins, starches and fruits a little bit, healthy fats, and then other things for treats and special occasions. I think, again, this is a very good pyramid for most people. It's probably going to be quite helpful for people who are on the cusp of developing some mild metabolic syndromes or they have a little bit of weight to lose. Cutting back on sugars and grains in this food pyramid can be helpful. This is a sustainable way to eat for many people. You can follow this pyramid for a lifetime. Nothing wrong with that approach. And I think it's very healthy for most individuals. If you want to take that and tweak it a little bit further, there's an autoimmune paleo approach that's very common. And it's very similar, but it does take out some specific things that can be triggering for a lot of people in terms of being triggers for autoimmune or inflammatory reactions. So it takes out things like dairies. Anything artificial at all would be removed in this case, particularly refined vegetable oils, sugars again, but also things like alcohols, non-nutritive sweeteners, so artificial sweeteners, right? So things like Splenda, stevia, etc., of those things like that, and leaves just the purely naturally occurring foods for the most part. So again, this is a little bit more of a restrictive approach. I think it's probably not going to be something that's sustainable long term for a lot of folks unless they're following it for a very specific reason, meaning they're trying to use it to help control an autoimmune condition, something along those lines. But it's a good place to start, and it's not a bad place to start if you're trying to work on reducing inflammation and get a sort of a good start on working on those things. Next pyramid up, sort of a ketogenic low carb diet food pyramid. I like this pyramid for a lot of reasons. The primary reason is that it is probably one of the best studied and most evidence-based ways to reverse metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. So following a low carb ketogenic diet, so that means eating under 100 grams of carbs a day for low carb, under 20 to 40 a day for ketogenic, is probably, again, one of the fastest and most reliable ways to fix metabolic syndrome, meaning high blood sugar, high insulin, elevated levels of triglycerides. All those things are fixed with this type of diet. And in addition, you tend to get fairly consistent and predictable weight loss over a fairly short period of time. Many people find this way of eating very sustainable for the very long term. Some people find it a little bit harder to do that. The main distinguishing factor between this versus the paleo approach is that there's a little bit more focus on using the healthy fats as a way to promote satiety, meaning feeling full, and to get your calorie base there, followed by proteins, then non-starchy veggies, and then all the extra stuff. So dairy, nuts, and then fruits, berries particularly, are going to be up at the top. But the main focus here is, again, healthy fats, so fats that come naturally in the environment: butter, mayonnaise, avocados, coconut oils, heavy creams, things that are minimally processed, followed by healthy meats, right? That's going to be your grass-fed, organic type meats are going to be some of your best options, and then followed by the non-starchy vegetables. So, Mediterranean diet, this one's very popular. It's more of a lifestyle than just a diet, and it promotes a lot of habits that result in excellent health, right? This is another excellent long-term option for a lot of people. It's very sustainable for most people. It's mostly similar to a low carb or ketogenic approach, but it does, or a paleo approach, but it allows a little bit more in the way of grains and things of that nature, breads, products. The key thing to keep in mind about a Mediterranean approach is that, again, it's more than just the diet, right? It's a whole lifestyle. And in the studies that were done about this, you really have to combine all the lifestyle factors. It's all about increased physical activity, managing stress, lots of social interactions in addition to the food. It's a whole lifestyle approach. It's not just about the food piece. And that's really, what we support as well in general. So again, Mediterranean, great approach. Make sure to combine it with all the other lifestyle factors. And there's a lot of good evidence behind this one as well in terms of long-term health and wellness. Another option that's become more popular of late is something called the Pegan food pyramid. So essentially, it's a bit of a conglomeration of a lot of the others, and I think between this one and Mediterranean, I think you're getting at something that's a very sustainable long-term maintenance diet for a lot of people who, again, they've reached health either through using one of the other pyramids like ketogenic to get their metabolic syndrome under control. And now they want to maybe add back a few things and have a little bit more of a long-term sustainable diet approach. Mediterranean is a great option. This Pegan food pyramid is a great option too. And I like it because it uses the base of the diet again as non-starchy plant foods, right? Followed by healthy meats and other proteins, and then adds on the other things as sort of optional extras on top of that. And again, I think that's a really great long-term approach because, again, the idea here is to avoid as much as you can things that come in boxes, packages, bags, and things that have labels. The more you can eat naturally occurring foods that don't require lots of extra processing and that aren't sold in the middle aisles of the grocery store, the better off you're going to be, right? So anything that comes from the outside of the grocery store, that's typically what's falling in most of these different food pyramids. And if you follow any one of them, you're going to be better off than getting your food from fast food or from packaged products. So pick one that seems right, do a little research, see which one might be a good fit for you. You can also talk to your doctor and your health coach. They can help you pick an eating style that's going to be manageable and that's going to help you improve your health. So we talked a lot about food pyramids. Let's talk a little bit about the non-diet, right? So this idea of intermittent fasting, it's very popular right now. The idea behind this is that we're giving our body a bit of a rest in terms of not having to metabolize food products. And what that does is allow our insulin levels to fall. Insulin as a hormone is one of the main drivers, not only of managing our blood sugar, which is important, but also of weight gain and of hunger, right? So insulin levels cause hunger, insulin levels cause weight gain, being elevated cause weight gain. So the idea with intermittent fasting is we give our body a little bit of a break from spikes of insulin, and it reduces what's called the area under the curve. So it reduces our overall exposure in a 24-hour period to insulin, the hormone. And so by doing so, we actually improve our weight, we can improve our cholesterol, You can have weight loss, you have blood pressure improvements. All these things are good benefits of intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is not for everybody, but for many people, it's a very safe and effective thing to do. Most people, when they want to do this, they simply choose an eating window that's between noon and 8 p.m. You can eat whatever you're going to have that day, regardless of whatever food pyramid that you try to follow. You have all your food between noon and 8. You have an 8-hour eating window. And then you have about a 16-hour fasting window, right? So it's called 16-8. There are other versions of this. The idea, again, is just to kind of compress the time during the day during which you're eating your food. It's not even necessarily about restricting calories. It's just about restricting time when you're exposed to food. Again, it's a very effective thing to do. If you think you might be interested in doing that, talk with your doctor and your coach, and they can help you figure out whether that might be a good option and if it's something you want to explore further. The bottom line here is that there's no one most effective diet to promote weight loss. In the short term, there's a lot of evidence that higher protein, lower carbohydrate diets and intermittent fasting can all be combined to promote greater, quicker weight loss, and also that these things have a unique ability to reverse and put metabolic syndrome into remission. But beyond that initial stage, many of these diets can be very healthy for you long term. Again, certain eating patterns are helpful for specific situations, again, like low carb for metabolic syndrome or a more plant-based approach for cholesterol issues and things of that nature. So again, adherence to a program and consistency and choosing naturally occurring non-processed foods is what's going to lead to the most long-term success. If your goal is to simply lose weight, you do need to create a negative energy balance. And the idea is to find a diet that does that without making you hungry and without giving you nutritional deficiencies. So explore these different patterns of eating, find one that works for you. The main thing is to avoid the SAD diet, the standard American diet. Ask your health team for help. Get started and find a goal. And again, just start with doing something consistently. It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress and about choosing a path and then working down that pathway. The pyramids are a great reference, but get information and input from your physician, your nurse, your coach as to what would be healthiest and best for you in your particular situation. And then track it. See what happens when you choose a pathway and be open to adjusting the plan as needed. Just because you choose to start with one pattern of eating doesn't mean you have to do that for the rest of your life, right? Means it might work that way for a long time for you. It might be a lifetime diet, but it might be something you do for a while, and then you make slight adjustments over time as you meet your goals. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. All right. Again, connect with your health coach to get started and to keep learning how to improve your metabolic health. And we will see you back in the next course. Take care.